Okay, yes, really appreciate everyone showing up today, and I'm sure some more will trickle on in, but we'll go ahead and get rolling here for the Understanding Vertical Assets workflows. This is something I don't think that Cityworks has really done much before, but we have a live panel discussion today with three people that we think will give completely different perspectives that have a lot of expertise in use in vertical asset workflows and technology and GIS and Cityworks is also. So if you do, this is going to try to be live and interactive. So if you do have any questions that come up, please drop those into the go to the red Live Now button and scroll, click on questions, and add those questions and comments for the presenters. And we have 30 minutes or so, but hopefully we will get to those as soon as possible. If you have any technical difficulties, click the question mark. And if you leave this session anytime, click the 3-button menu in the right corner and leave that way. Please visit the ratings and reviews modules on the navigation bar and rate this session as well. And then a quick plug for our sponsors and exhibitors. If you haven't had a chance to, before the conference is over, please go visit our partners in the virtual space. And we will go ahead and go, but I am going to let the panels, I'll let them kind of go ahead and give themselves their own introductions. But I'm sure you've seen this in every session so far, but this is just the Cityworks Safe Harbor statement. I'm going to just touch on, vertical asset just to make sure, what it is. Everybody's on the same page. We'll let our panel, introduce themselves, quickly talk about, some of the projects they worked on, their approach, what they do. And then we will go ahead and start on the question portions of it. So please feel free to submit any of your questions and we'll try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. So when we are talking about vertical assets, so many organizations have spent so much time maintaining and tracking their horizontal assets from their water mains to their sewer mains and that horizontal infrastructure, street center lot, there's roads and sidewalks and stormwater. So we're really starting to see this monster uptick in vertical assets and how people manage those. So we're talking about buildings, so your facilities, your city halls, your park facilities, the buildings, the warehouses, and then also on the utility side, your pump station, your water treatment plants. Organizations are spending millions and millions of dollars on these, and they really want to be able to make sure that they get, that the bang for their buck on those investments and keeping track of them and maintaining them, and then being more proactive in that. So when we're talking vertical assets, we're talking these big multi-million-dollar facilities, treatment plants, pump stations, that have to be maintained, that have to work, for customers to get their water, for their sewer to be treated. So just different aspects like that. So we'll go ahead and let Jake kind of introduce himself and go ahead and get started here.
Thanks, Carl. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is Jake Evinger. I'm an operations manager with Trimble Consulting, overseeing our virtual design and construction services teams. Trimble Consulting is a professional services group that helps our customers to digitize their business processes and integrate data and technology workflows. We also provide virtual design and construction solutions, including data production, to drive Trimble technologies when our customers don't have the resources to do it themselves. In support of Cityworks solutions, we offer field data capture services utilizing static, mobile, and aerial scanning devices in both LiDAR and photogrammetric point cloud technologies. We also provide data processing services to convert point clouds or to upgrade existing drawings into 2D or 3D deliverables optimized for ArcGIS Indoors and Cityworks. Finally, our technical team can assist with integrations and web services development to connect data across platforms and devices from the office to the field and back again. So please let me know if you have any questions on these subjects during the Q&A session. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Jess?
Sure. I'm Jessica Stack. I am with Power Engineers, and I've been with Power since about 2012. So happy to be able to be here with you guys, and thanks everyone for coming. So before I kind of dive into some of the vertical asset approaches and implementations and stuff that we've done in the past and that we see often, one of the first things that's really important to conceptualize is where you are right now with your data, as well as where do you want to be? You know, do you want to focus on asset management? Is that your driving force behind the GIS that you're constructing? Do you want to focus on data editing in the field? Do you want to focus on utility network? That kind of thing. You know, do you need to keep those things in mind so that when you implement vertical assets, we can kind of tie it all together? So what I'll go ahead and talk about are some of the approaches that we've taken in the past. So the first one is going to be here on the top right, hopefully your top right, the larger image. This is a map-focused vertical asset implementation. In this example, we're taking a diagram, or in this case, a piping diagram, and digitizing the assets on top of the diagram, and then we can display that as well as the assets in a map. So you're giving your users that frame of reference that they need to kind of help orient themselves in this layout. And then in the lower left here, this is also a map-focused approach, and this utilized the Esri tool for Facility Information System Data Model. And that's taking your assets and relating them back to the room as well as the floor that they exist on. And in this example here, we have things broken out by HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and that's kind of a nice level to go to, as opposed to having all of those systems in one equipment table. You're kind of breaking it apart by system and by type. So you can see many things at one time. You're not necessarily, you know, it's much easier to kind of navigate your data. And then as another option, you have the ability to use a hierarchical design. So you can have a building, for example, as your spatial asset, and then you can relate the components or equipment groups to those systems and back to the building they reside in. And all of these examples are Cityworks map compatible, and all have the ability to set up inbox searches so that you can pull and view the data that way as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. We'll wrap up with you, Chad.
Hey, I'm Chad Foley, Technology Supervisor at City of Raleigh, North Carolina. We're using vertical assets kind of in two spaces, one for all of our city-owned facilities, for our trades like plumbing, HVAC, electrical, things like that. And then we're also using ArcGIS indoors with the wastewater treatment plant, the indoors and Cityworks integration. So you can go ahead. We used to collect assets with a custom web form that goes into a related table. So actually, I'm in the office today. I'm like the only one here, but I can right now go into Cityworks, do an asset search, and say buy safety trade and pull up all the fire extinguishers in this building, or all the HVAC blowers, or based on that related table that's captured in this form. But now we're using field maps to do the collection. That's an example screenshot of that asset search of the One Exchange Plaza, which is the building I'm in there, or I'm in now. You can go ahead. The search results of just, some examples of, you know, the different vertical assets that we've captured and tied to this building. You know, we do PM work mostly around this type of vertical assets. Here's just some example work orders. We have them scheduled and, you know, so they're recurring. And then to switch over to kind of our wastewater treatment plant where we're using the ArcGIS indoors and the Cityworks integration, you can see this is level 1 of a 3-level building. That's the floor switcher tool where you can, you know, look at the different floors, the different assets there. For the indoors, we use field maps to collect the data. So I can actually go into field maps, collect or add in a new pump or valve, and immediately do work on it in Cityworks right then and there. So just some screenshots.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate the intro, guys. So as some of the questions keep coming in, we'll go ahead and at least start with this one. So maybe Jake, you can go ahead and start us off. Like, why are you seeing organizations, you know, migrating from these old, outdated processes to more modern, you know, proactive, you know, workflows, you know, to manage their vertical assets?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's almost always the first question, and when we get involved in an engagement like this, the answer is relatively simple. It's in order to implement a kind of an enterprise level technology, excuse me, you need to have a standardized data set to work from, and that's one of the big challenges that we're seeing with most of our customers right now is disparate data sets for different properties and there are different technologies being used, older properties perhaps having, you know, analog drawings or even hard copy blueprints in some cases. More modern properties having, you know, 2D CAD, 3D models even for some of the newer stuff. And, you know, all of that stuff has to talk together and at least be functional at a base common denominator in order to be usable in the system. So a lot of times when we're asked to engage, it's for a, you know, to try and create that standard across all the different properties for that are going to be implemented in the system.
Okay, thanks, Jake. Jess, are you kind of seeing the same thing, or?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a bit similar, I would say. I think from our perspective, you know, there's definitely that return on investment that people see from the horizontal asset side, especially in Cityworks. You know, that's been the thing forever, right? I mean, the return on investment from tracking those assets and vertical assets are the next frontier. You know, it's like the next logical step. And in order to really facilitate that asset management, you've got to have the GIS structure if you really want to hit it home. So it all kind of ties together.
Yep. Awesome. So Chad, so why did Raleigh, you know, why did they start, you know, migrating and changing their workflows, you know, for their vertical assets?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, data-driven decisions is a big one. You know, if we want to say, I need 2 more positions to do this work, our city manager wants to, you know, well, prove it, and we need to prove it through data. So we have other tools to you know, analyze the data, and it needs the data. You know, we also, these plants and these treatment plants are getting so complex, and these assets are getting so complex, it's really important to catalog them and, you know, document what's being done to them, and to kind of capture that tribal knowledge of, you know, we got a lot of mechanics that have been here 20 years, but that's not happening anymore. You're not seeing that as much. So we want to capture that tribal knowledge, get it into a standardized, like Jake said, you know, data system.
Okay, awesome. So that's, I mean, everybody mentioned data. I mean, is that, you know, Jess, is that how organizations are starting to this process is really focusing on their GIS data?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where it all starts, you know, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like the backbone, you know, and it
Right.
allows for efficiency and automation, so we can start, you know, triggering events or work orders based on events or failures or things, now that it's, you know, good data.
So do most organizations, do they have the data there, or is it this kind of this big process that they're having to go through to get the data before they can get started?
It really depends. I would say, at least from my experience, it's a decent 50-50 split where some really don't have it yet. They have some maybe they have lift stations or something like that. But as far as like the actual plants, it might just be a building footprint. They haven't really gotten around to skimming the surface.
Okay, so they're starting out. I mean, is that how you guys started, Chad? And is like starting out big and then kind of slowly breaking it down into the different levels?
Yeah, I mean, data collection is a big effort, and it's ongoing. You know, we're still building new facilities. We got to collect that data. We're trying to figure out, can we, you know, convert CAD drawings and BIM files to, you know, 3D maps to automatically, you know, pull that data in and know, you know, the location of these HVAC units and different things. But data collection is huge. I see people starting out with, you know, that's kind of related tables idea of just getting it into a list or an Excel sheet or a table, and then we're kind of converting that over to a geospatial, you know, map, so we can do the indoors spatially aware vertical assets.
Yeah. Jake, so are they, most projects that are you working on and seeing, is it, you know, from the start, you know, before development, or people coming in on the back end and doing the data collection there? Like how, or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix. Sometimes sometimes you don't know what you're missing until you get started, and you start trying to put the, you know, the different shapes in the different shaped holes, and you're finding that some of it doesn't quite work. So it's, you know, either an exercise in supplementing the data, or just collecting data that for a property that has changed a lot, let's say, you know, over the last 10, 20 years since whenever the last recorded data set they have is. Yeah, that's kind of the perspective that I'm seeing right now.
So are organizations starting out with like a pilot project? Or are they going full blown vertical assets across the board? Jess, how did most of these projects end up starting out?
I see a combination of the two. You know, I think a lot of it comes down to resources available to assign to a project. If you do start off collecting, you know, not doing the pilot and doing all of it at one time, I mean, that's a massive undertaking. That's something you need the resources for in your organization to be able to accomplish that. You know, and then also, how much data do they already have, if any at all, that can help, you know, drive that. So I've definitely seen both.
How did you guys get started, Chad? Yeah,
We got a trial license, free trial, 30-day or 60-day trial for ArcGIS indoors, and we took our train station that was recently built that has some nice CAD drawings, converted that into GIS, and then pulled it into Cityworks, and just kind of started showing people that, hey, this is possible, and then that got the buy-in, and we were able to kind of negotiate a good deal on the indoors product. And then we did that. Then we went over to the wastewater treatment plant and got, you know, several different like small groups of mechanics to do the collection using field maps. And there were a lot of lessons learned from that data collection effort, but it's gotten really good and efficient now. So it's live. It's, you know, they're doing PMs and repair work at our major treatment plant, and we have another treatment plant in the other part of the city that we're working on now.
You kind of seeing the same process, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, we don't engage too deeply beyond the, you know, the data capture and the setup, but you know, I think what's interesting is different types of data are being kind of integrated now through the same processes. So, you know, GIS data, civil, you know, construction data, vertical asset, you know, traditional BIM type data. We all have an opportunity now. It's all a lot closer in format to each other, you know, than what it used to be in the past. So there's a lot of exploration in how those different data sets can get integrated now. And then once you get it all in the same place, can you apply the different workflows to the different types of data that you now have access to through the same conduits?
Yeah, because everybody, I mean, essentially wants access to the data at some point, whether it's the actual GIS data or the work that's being created on it. I mean, Jess, are you having to start seeing some like integrations with other systems just besides Esri and Cityworks?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Integrations are always, second and third line item, for sure. And I think the positive side to doing a pilot and taking, smaller chunks is that you get those small to medium victories and you get that user acceptance, which is going to be that momentum that keeps you going.
Yeah, I think that's a key piece too. The data collection crew should be small and consistent, and then they can, we went ahead and created the work order templates for each kind of group, and then we'd go to the next group, and it was kind of an iterative process.
Awesome. So guys, keep click on that live now button there and keep submitting your questions. So doing really good here. So Jake, what are some lessons learned, from these projects that you've been a part of?
From the data collection perspective, it's usually a pretty big logistical challenge that involves not only spatial management, but a lot of personnel management. So many times when we get engaged, we're being asked to capture data for the purpose of a particular, let's say, business unit in a customer's office or for a particular workflow. But the process of kind of getting approvals and getting on site and having permission to be in certain spaces, et cetera, requires many different business areas to participate in. So logistically, it's a lot more work than you think. It's not as easy as just getting a scanning team on site to run through the building or run through the grounds. And so that's where you start exploring different types of technology. Some technology is faster than others. Some technology is less invasive than others. And so having a kind of a fleet of options, let's say, is a big benefit when you start looking at how to plan an operation like that.
Yeah, ultimately it's going to be a process, right? It's going to take times and steps and hurdles, to kind of get through. What about you, Jess? Some lessons learned from the projects that you've been on?
Oh, sure. Yeah, a lot of similar ones actually to what Jake said. The resourcing side is key. When you start a project, ideally you keep those same stakeholders for the whole project and you're not having to worry about resources coming and going or, that kind of thing. That really helps. And that's a really vital part of the project. Also, the data collection aspect and how you construct your GIS hierarchy to be able to support the data editing. The more difficult it is for the end user to access and edit the data, you're just not setting yourself up for success there. So you really have to keep that aspect in mind for sure when you're doing this.
Chad, how difficult was it to migrate the vertical assets into your SDEs for the ArcGIS indoors?
Well, we're lucky to have a couple of very talented GIS people that helped with that. But I'm actually interested in what Jake did at the intro there about some of the. I think there's some new tooling and new things for some conversion of these types of things, but for me, the biggest lesson learned was, the technical part is always the easiest part. It's the people. So the biggest lesson learned was really just understanding the asset landscape for the treatment plan in this example. What really is an asset, and it's easy to get bogged down into such a granular level. And while you want to capture all those things, you may not. It may suffice to do work orders to a room instead of to all these different objects in the room, or just tie the work to a building and not get it down to the water fountain, just for simplicity and sanity. And so that's something not to be taken lightly at all, just defining what is an asset. I mean, a treatment plant is really mostly just motors, pumps, and valves. We don't want to get too bogged down with, infinite amounts of gear that we don't necessarily care about or want to report on as much. If a motor costs 40 grand to replace, we do care about that. So just that was a big, lesson learned on the granularity of what we're tracking and what we want to report on.
Right. Jake, so if somebody's getting you guys a service, I mean, the granular level that they're wanting to go, is it pretty detailed or is it just depend?
It varies, and it's kind of connected to my earlier comment about, which business area is interested in the data. We'll have security, let's say, be interested in a certain level of detail and a certain 3D representation of the assets, and then we'll have space planning and events be interested in a totally separate, and then FAC Ops is going to have all the interest in the equipment and MEP systems in a building, for example, or at a plant. So I'd say probably the most important thing to understand is, in the beginning, when you're setting up when you're planning, is to have that discovery. Take the time to have that discovery and to talk about it with as many potential stakeholders as you can, because everyone's going to want access to the data once it's set up. But if you only get out of it what you put into it, right? So you need to have a really comprehensive plan at the beginning to make sure that if you're capturing data, that you're capturing all the details you need. If you're kind of upgrading data or just data processing of existing stuff, that you've got it all standardized at the same level of detail for all concerned stakeholders.
Jess, when you go into an organization, do you have a recommendation, kind of off the bat of what to start out with as far as granular level?
No, honestly, like Jake said, it's entirely up to discovery and what we determine based upon the client needs. There's definitely no one size fits all when it comes to this. There's no right way to do it, no single way. It's just really depends upon, a multitude of factors. And we definitely look at all of those in the beginning.
Yeah. So we are only got about 3 minutes left. And so I do kind of want to end this with one last question for each of y'all. And then if we didn't get to your questions, we'll email those out and we'll try to get those answered to you as well. But I mean, what does the future look like for managing vertical assets? What does the technology and what are the trends over the next 3 to 5 years that you see are going to be really important? We'll go ahead and start with you, Jake.
It's for me, it's about data and how to process lots of it. So it's becoming easier and easier to collect data. It's becoming easier to store it and to categorize it. But what do you do with it is the real question, right? Can you have too much? Yeah, you can have lots of data that doesn't do anything for you. So being strategic about the data that you curate, I think is kind of really critical for the future, and coming up with a good plan for that and standardizing a plan for it.
What about you, Jess?
I think 3D and virtual reality would be very cool and not out of the question, as well as some kind of model to incorporate treatment plan into the utility network. Would not take those off the table.
Awesome. So, Chad, what does the future look like for Raleigh over the next 3 to 5 years for managing your vertical assets?
Like Jessica said, I think 3D is a big deal. We'll be implementing that in Cityworks, and the CAD conversion automation, because a lot of some of that stuff we did was very manual, and if we don't have CAD files, we just draw them on the map, and that's painful. So some more automation there with capturing the data. For us, then the future is we want to start to use Respond, because we have all of these assets have QR codes, and we actually have some signs in some of these rooms where the asset's hard to get to, or underground, or in water or something, and that we just scan the QR code, and we'd like to get the guys to start using Respond. and kept doing some of the scanning with the barcodes there. Maybe we have eBuilder construction management, which is also a Trimble product, and that's where the BIM files initially come, and maybe getting those into GIS. The days of having as-builts on a shared drive are kind of over. We want to get that data into GIS and then track it throughout, its life cycle or its different system, from construction to maintenance to whatever else. So that's more future state, I think.
Okay. Awesome. Time is up. We really appreciate it, Jake, Jess, and Chad, and everybody for attending. Hopefully everyone had an awesome conference for the last couple days, and hopefully we can do this again in person next year. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.